computer.
And as Nico said, and then your PC explodes. So I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna have to order a new one. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen now because I created some notes. I just share my this window. Can you see? Yes, cool. So hello everyone. The first topic that we have is about maintainer training. I want to talk for a few minutes about some tips to make code reviews in GitLab UI more effective. I'm gonna touch all of these topics very briefly, but some of them could be like their own session. So I'm gonna start. So first of all, many of the things that I'm going to talk about here are just are covered in detail in the contribution guidelines documentation in GitLab UI. So I highly recommend to read some of these documentation. I'm particularly fond of the first three ones: adding new components, adding CSS, and the commit message conventions. They cover things like how to add utility classes, how to use utility mixins to style components, and also how to test breaking changes and create an integration branch in GitLab. So they are very recommended. Okay, so by the way, if you feel like you want to interrupt, if you want to ask any question, please interrupt me at any point. Okay, so second topic is pajamas component. So in GitLab UI, we implement some components that are based on the design specifications in design.gitlab.com. That is the website for our design system. I highly recommend to get familiarized with all of these pages because not only from the point of view of reviewing GitLab UI Merge Requests, if you are ever using pajamas component in GitLab, these guidelines will make you more effective while doing so. So it is highly recommended. And in the context of reviewing GitLab UI Merge Requests, if some of the changes may break some of the expectations that are specified in the design system. So highly recommended. So if you see that a pajamas component is added or updated in both a product designer, there is already a reminder in the review roulette. If we are modifying a pajamas component, a product designer that is in charge of designing that component will be mentioned here. So I highly recommend to follow this recommendation. And also, this is something that is probably optional, but I always do anyways. I think that it's very useful to have a second couple of eyes when you want those changes to adhere to the design specs. So if you want to do your manual testing yourself, you can go and open Figma and open the pajamas UI kit. So this is very, very helpful. I think that you are probably using Figma to review the designs that a product designer is making for the product that you are working on. So this is pretty much the same. And the cool thing is that you can go here and see each variation of a component and see what is for example, the space in between the text and the container of the text. And there are many details. So if you want to help to make sure that a component always adheres to the specifications, you can also take a look at Figma and compare with the implementation in GitLab UI.
I'm going to interrupt you, Enrique. I agree completely, and getting someone from UX or product designer to also confirm this is the right thing to do, especially the one who designed it.
That's right. It's very important, like to involve a product designer. So by the way, how do you do manual testing in GitLab UI? First, I know that we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, do we do manual testing for each merge request? I think personally, I think that it is a good practice. In GitLab UI, it's like even more important. Usually, you need the best way that to understand the code, that what is happening in a change in a merge request, is when you can play with all of the interactions that are happening in the component. Also, it is way easier to understand CSS when you go to the to the web inspector and you see how each role applies to an element. So it's like it really improves the way that you see and understand code. And also, if you are, you care about accessibility, it is also we have tools within the storybooks. So by the way, review apps work extremely well in GitLab UI Merge Requests. So you can just go to the view app and it will open an instance of the storybooks. And I find that very, very useful to not have to check locally a branch and then start up the storybook service. Talking about accessibility, there are some plugins, storybook plugins that we are using to raise some flags and when there are accessibility issues in a component that you can use. We also have other cool plugins. If you want to, for example, test how what a component looks like when the viewport changes, for example. Here, you could say, hey, I want to test this in a small breakpoint and see if the date picker is working correctly. So yeah, if you care about, evaluating how a component is working in all of those different environments, we have some tools in there that are very handy. Reviewing CSS changes. So this one is like a whole topic that we could cover in another meeting, but I'm gonna focus on 2 points. First one, when you're reviewing a GitLab UI Merge request, try that all of the CSS that we are adding has a very low specificity. I put an image here of a specificity calculator that is online, and you can see like how specific a selector is. And the higher the specificity is, the more difficult it is to override. So it is very important to keep the specificity low. And the second most important rule, in my opinion, is using utility mixins as much as possible. The reason is that utility mixins are based on the design system guidelines. Let me show you that here. Oh, by the way, I think that I'm not even sharing my other screen, right? When I switch to the web browser, you're not seeing that. Can you confirm it?
I just see your VS Code and I hear birds.
Okay, so probably I'm gonna try to fix that because I'm usually jumping between the web browser and the editor and I'm not even sharing that. Okay, so I'm gonna take 30 seconds to share what I was like showing here, but at some point I jumped into Figma and I was like displaying how you can see all of the specification of a component here. And also I was demoing some of the plugins in Storybook, like the accessibility one, and also how you can switch between breakpoints. Sorry about that.
Are these accessibility ones new? This looks new-ish.
It is not new. It's like it has like 6 months included in Storybook.
Okay, cool. This looks really nice.
It is. There are many components that should have a different, should look different depending on the viewport of a device. So you can also test that here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So let me go back to the Visual Studio Code here. So I was talking about utility mixins. I was saying, hey, as much as you can, ensure that we are using utility mixins because those are based in the design specs of pajamas, especially in the foundation. So we have like a color scheme, a color palette. We have some typography specifications. We also have some layout specifications that say, hey, the spacing between some text and something that is very closely related to the component should be 2 pixels or 4 pixels. So the utility mixins are based on those guidelines. And when we are using them, we are adhering to those rules. At the same time, we should also acknowledge that there are exceptions. There are things that are very difficult to implement with utility mixins, and we cannot use them. For example, here in the path component, these little nodes, this is a very complex shape, and we wouldn't be able to render that using utility mixins. So in those cases, it is fine to make an exception. At the same time, there are components with many variations, like the buttons or the badges, and they share like some style structure. Like there are 5 variations, and the 5 of them have a background, have a color, and have a shadow. But all of those 3 properties have different values. In those cases, utility mixins make the code look verbose, and I think that is less maintainable. So in those cases, I think that is also like good to, I think that it is allowable to use a different approach. But anyways, if you cannot use the utility mixins, try using the variables. I don't have a reference here, but use the CSS variables that the utility mixins are based on.
Can I interrupt real fast? I just want to also remind everyone that Enrique added important mixins as well for outside GitLab UI stuff. So if you see people using them, now we can override some things with important.
That's right. That's very, very, very important. And also in the context of the GitLab application, where we have a lot of CSS with high specificity, and sometimes we need to override them. So, thank you, Sarah. Okay, next point is the symmetrical commits. If you see this warning in the danger roulette, please point the merge request author to review the commit guidelines. So here you will see there is a lot of information about how you have to prefix the commit, depending on the type of change that you are making. And it is not only the warning. Like sometimes we are creating a merge request with a commit that is marked as a fix or a feature, and that will create a new release in GitLab UI, a new release number. And that's not necessary when you are just making changes in the documentation of GitLab UI. So if you see that there is a commit prefix that is used incorrectly, you can just, please request the author to use the correct one. Also, in the case of breaking changes, sometimes we are going to introduce a breaking change deliberately. In those cases, you have to explain what the breaking change is in the commit description. So last point, probably the most important, is detecting breaking changes in GitLab UI. So what is a breaking change? It's basically that sometimes we make a change in a GitLab UI component, and that is breaking the GitLab application. And it is breaking other applications as well, because there are the status. I think that the customer portal is using GitLab UI and also the status page. So we have to be very careful about that. So what is a critical breaking change? One that is breaking the visual appearance or is breaking a feature in GitLab. This one is critical. The other ones is just like you are introducing a change that is breaking the test in GitLab. And that is
Sorry, Enrique, can you back up just slightly? Breaking change is a change, includes changes to the visual appearance. Does that mean like CSS tweaks, like the color being changed, or maybe a padding being changed, counts as a visual appearance and therefore critical breaking change, or not?
No, actually, I think that's probably not the best way of describing it. What I mean by visual appearance is that you introduce a change that introduces a visual change that is undesirable. For example, let's say that you are changing something, that you're changing the way that you're displaying text within a button. And then that changed because you have to display it in a certain way when the button is displayed in a block and it's occupying an entire row within the viewport. In those cases,
so for instance, so for instance, layout changes, changing something from block to flex or something like that is maybe a breaking change.
That's right. It is like that to create a situation that is unexpected within GitLab.
I think what makes this hard, and I appreciate you putting this down on quote unquote paper, is that the interface of a component and is way more than just the props you pass to it. It's the display context. Sometimes we could even have coupling and test to like some inner values, and we shouldn't be doing that, but it's good to know that a breaking change isn't just the pure, input that we give just to this view component, but yeah, it can be, oh, well, now we anticipate a whole new CSS context that this component is only applicable to. And that's a huge challenge to detect that. Go ahead, keep going, Enrique.
That's right, and with these recommendations, I'm not trying to say that we should be responsible of catching those situations, because we are working in GitLab UI in the context of an application that is huge with many features, and we will never be able to catch all of the situations. What I think that we can have as responsibility is just like knowing that we have some rules of thumb, like, hey, maybe we change the structure of the internal structure of a component significantly. We can request to create an integration branch, just for the sake of knowing that, we took some action to prevent a situation that like the one that I'm describing here. So I make a note here about breaking changes versus breaking changes. The thing here is that sometimes we are changing the structure of a GitLab UI component, and that's breaking a snapshot test in GitLab. And in some ways, that's not critical, and that's expected. Like if you have a snapshot test, it is expected that it's gonna break if you are changing the structure of a dependency. So that's not critical, but at the same time, we can save a lot of time to the people that is taking care of upgrading GitLab UI by creating an integration branch and catching this once early. So I have some examples of breaking changes here. The one that I think that we should care the most about is about when we are changing, there is a merge request that is changing a component that is highly used within GitLab. For example, buttons, drop-downs, modals, labels. If you see something that is changing that, it's probably that change, like we are not considering all of the possible ways in which that component is used. So if you see a change like that, request a merge request author to create an integration branch, and then you can do some smoke testing. If you see a class selector that is removed, also like that's probably a reason for a test within GitLab to break. Because, and by the way, I think that one of the best way to fix the problem of breaking tests within GitLab is actually writing better tests in GitLab. So if you can go and write a test that is not making assumptions about the internals of GitLab UI, that will be great, because in that way you are not, you are not breaking, you cannot break anything. You are treating GitLab UI like black boxes. So That's very important. I already said that, but we have the create integration branch job. It's very easy just to start that job, and that will create a branch and upgrade that version of GitLab UI. I mean, it's gonna create, it's going to install the package that is generated by that merge request in GitLab UI. And in that way, you can do some smoke testing to detect potential liabilities. So it is very recommended. It's very easy to do it. So I don't see the reason not to do it. If you feel like you don't have time to actually do some smoke testing in the merge request, please involve a product designer or find someone else that maybe may want to help to ensure that we are not introducing breaking changes. And that's all on my part. So any questions or comments?
My only comment is just to note that example Enrique used about the changing the class name was why I posted to front-end maintainers like last week and was like, please don't push things so I can untangle this knot. It was precisely that we were depending on that class name. So definitely keep an eye out for it on both ends because it can cause all sorts of trouble.
I guess who was the person who merged that merge request?
In that situation, was it master breaking and it was tests that were breaking, or was there like a CSS breaking because there was references to this class from there?
The tests broke.
Okay.
So there was a capybara test that was relying on the GL legend class, and the class was renamed in GitLab UI because we got two different kinds of legends. And then it was compounded by also the chore MRs that we do to push through the GitLab UI changes to update that. Somebody went on vacation and had one assigned to them. So like a whole log jam of changes backed up behind that one failure.
Oh yeah. Now that yeah, that can be painful when the versions just keep stacking up. I did leave one question on here because we currently have this mix-in component class style for styling things for Vue components, and I know that it sounds like there's a bit of history to this. But if we're adding a component that's definitely only going to be used in Vue, is it all right if we don't do component classes in GitLab UI and we just inline the utility classes that way? And Sarah has enlightened me on that this is we've talked about, but might be worth revisiting. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts or opinions.
I think that it is worth revisiting, definitely. I've changed my mind a lot regarding supporting HAML from the context of GitLab UI. I think that it is not, well, it's been unsuccessful in the first place. We don't have cases where we are taking the CSS of GitLab UI and using it effectively in the context of HAML. I don't think that we will ever do that because we are not putting enough resources to do it effectively. So I think that that's just creating complexity, unnecessary complexity in the context of GitLab UI. Definitely implementing GitLab UI components using utility classes directly would reduce the amount of CSS that we are writing. So it is worth like creating a revision RFC to discuss that.
Yeah, I realize I have an RFC I said I was going to create last week, and then I'll create this one today. I'm going to do it right now. So you don't hear anything from me, then something happened. But no, thanks. I will create an RFC for that. And yeah, I think it's worth us revisiting because if there's an issue, if there's a reason, but now it doesn't seem like there's a reason, we should totally change it. Thanks, Enrique, and thanks, Sarah.
The document that you showed to us, Enrique, that you gave this talk on, basically, are you publishing that anywhere, or?
Yes, I don't know what is the best place to publish that. I was thinking that maybe I could just create a merge request in GitLab UI and include it within the docs. But I haven't made my mind about that. I could be very happy to, if you give me some recommendations.
Would it make sense? Oh, sorry, Mark, go on.
After you, please, Nico.
I wanted to ask if it would make sense to add a set of checkboxes to the merge request template that follow the structure of that document. Like verify that this is click.
Yes, I think that it would be very useful. We do have a merge request template with some of the recommendations that I gave here. So yeah, probably I'm gonna revisit it and see if I can add something else. So is there any other topics that that we want to cover here? No, apparently no. So it seems that that's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye.